What's up, YouTube? Southern Comic Geek coming to you with not a mystery unboxing, not a comic book haul, but we're talking Valiant comics today. Now, before everybody tunes us out because of all the horrible things that you've heard of overprinted chromium covers like Turok and Bloodshot, just listen to us as we talk about Valiant and why we collect Valiant. And you might get a tidbit and you might actually pick up a trade somewhere and read some good comics. Now, before we get into talking about all that, be sure to smash that like button, hit the subscribe button because we are awfully close to hitting that 600 subscriber mark, at which case I'm going to be giving a New Mutants 98 9.4 CGC slab away. So you want to be a part of that. So check out former videos to see details on that, but also the bell notification so that when videos like this drop ever so randomly, you will be one of the first people to know, and you can make the conscientious decision as to whether or not to watch it now or to watch it later. But as long as you watch it, we appreciate it. And so joining me today, we've got Justin from Collecting Valiant. What is going on, man?
Hey, good morning, Jason. Thanks for having me, my man.
Yes, sir. So we've got some people popping in the chat. So let's say hi to them before we get started here. We got Tapia's family who came in early. And this was the comment that he made. I thought I was the only one collecting Valiant. Yeah,
No, thankfully not.
yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that right there. But I certainly agree with his estimation here. We've got Sith Lordley in the house. What is going on? I was over there with Sith Lordley on his Spine Tick show last week. William Smallwood, thanks for joining us. And so, I met him, Justin, on Instagram. Hence, because of his name and his postings, I said, "Hey, we've got something in common here." And I have been doing these shows talking about kind of more niche collecting, because I think that, especially in this day and age, FOMO and spec market and all this other kind of stuff has led people to just chase the tail of wherever the next dollar can be made. Whereas the purest form of the hobby, I think, can be found in collecting what you like. And in this case, we're going to be talking about Valiant comics today. So before we get started, Justin, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe how you got into collecting comics in general.
Wow, so that story goes. So I'm 44 years old. This goes back to when I was like 6 or 8 years old. Um, my youngest brother was being born, and so we went and stayed. I have two younger brothers, and so my younger brother Jeremy and I went and stayed with my uncle and my grandparents. And my uncle was a huge Barry Smith fan. Before Barry Windsor Smith signed at BWS, he
Right.
was Barry Smith. And we're talking before Giant Size X-Men. Yeah, so right there, you've got a cover with him.
I got his signature right there.
Nice.
You don't see too many of those. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And so we stayed with him for a summer. And, I'm from Kansas, the middle of Kansas. And so there weren't many comic shops. And so needless to say, he was showing me some of his X-Men. And the one that stood out to me was an X-Men with Storm on the cover with her mohawk. And it had the purple background. It was like maybe 121, I can't remember. And I got hooked by the art. And so we went to a comic shop. This is honestly 35 years ago. That comic shop is still around in Wichita, Kansas. It's called Prairie Dog Comics. And so he went and let me just pick out some comics. And, I picked up a Tarzan. I picked up, I can't remember. He was questioning my pickups, but I was like 6 or 8 at the time, and I was hooked ever since. And, I started getting into, buying DC and Marvel, bought all the Next Men series. So issue 21 with the first Hellboy. That's not a San Diego Comic-Con or Italian variant, and then in the 90s, I kind of got tired of, the Robin ones and the Spider-Man, and Valiant kind of came out. And I didn't really get into it till issue 12 of Magnus, the first appearance of Turok, or that same month, Shadow Man 1 came out. And then I started, feverishly collecting all the back issues. and Barry Windsor Smith did art, and I'm like, oh my
Mhm.
god. So it just kind of bookended full circle in the course of like 6 years, and I've been collecting Valiant ever since. Um, the old Valiant, the new Valiant, foreign Valiant. Yeah, I've been working on an encyclopedia of the first 805 comics that a gentleman by the name of Seaborn Adamson created, a Valiant Continuity Bible. And in 1996, unfortunately, he was killed in a car crash,
Mm.
and he had, through comic price guides, solicited this for sale. And I have a copy of it, and so for the last 10 years, been kind of chronicling and carrying on what he had done.
Oh, sweet.
And it's I could publish it, but man, that's so much work.
Well, when it becomes work and it's not as fun for the hobby anymore, you're kind of like, whatever. But some things like that might be worth the sacrifice in the sense that all the other people that benefit from things like that. So, in talking about Barry Windsor Smith, I'm a huge Barry Windsor Smith fan myself. I even collect Room comics. Okay, so from the
Nice,
Malibu.
from Malibu.
Uh-huh. And so, matter of fact, you see my X-Men wall. So X-Men is one of my other man things, and so as you can see, there's the Barry Windsor Smith Wolverine cover. Um, I was recently listening to a podcast called Robservations. It's done by Rob Liefeld. And so he was
Oh
talking
wow.
about Image Comics and in the 90s. And he said, really Image and Valiant, they came out about the same time. And Image was more about the art. It wasn't really about story. And which was really shocking to hear Rob Liefeld say anything about that. But I guess because he's an artist, he's not really dissing on himself so much. But he said Valiant was more about the story. Now, I'm not taking anything away from the art because they do have great art, and we'll get into the rebirth era as I term it in 2012. But even in the old days, you're talking about guys like Don Perlin, who are better known for books like Moon Knight, and so they Barry Windsor Smith. I mean, we keep talking about him. So they didn't have a lack of great artists back in those days. You think about Frank Miller doing the Unity covers. Joe Quesada, some of his early work, I think maybe his first work, is in Valiant Comics. And then, of course, that carried on when they did the rebirth in 2012. Great artists like Clayton Crane. Well, we'll back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. So one of the other questions I had for you is, what is your favorite, or who is your favorite Valiant character?
Oh God, that's like asking a person what their favorite movie might be. It's a genre.
Right.
So Harbinger from you know VH1. So the 1990s Valiant was amazing. And all of those characters, because it was a rival to the X-Men. It was another team of teen characters. Yeah, right there. You've got the Harbinger Zero Pink on your wall,
Signed by the man, Jim Shooter
signed by,
himself.
yep, signed by Jim. So, um, but there's great story arcs. There's great, you know, yeah. I loved Archer and Armstrong through issue 12, and then when Mike Barron took over, it kind of changed the dynamic of the characters for me.
Mm-hmm.
But also, when it was written by Fred Van Lente in 2012, 2013, it was really good too. So God, there's so many great characters. Um, Probably Shadow Man is probably still one of my most favorite characters. Um, but there's stories like Glitch in Bloodshot 25 from 2012 that
Mm-hmm.
Louis LaRosa did the art and Peter Milligan did the story, that was phenomenal. Um, oh, right there, Eternal Warrior. Yeah, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
a
I mean, yeah,
man.
you're right. It's like
Yeah.
asking, which is your favorite, who's your favorite kid? It's like, okay.
Well, which one didn't piss me off today?
Um, I mean, because think about it. there's something about the Eternal Warrior that speaks to you that Bloodshot doesn't, but then there's something about Bloodshot that speaks to you about you, or maybe something that you've been through. And all characters are like this, but we're talking about Valiant Comics in general. And so Bloodshot, I would think, was probably the most well known especially because of the most recent movie, which came out at the absolute worst time for a movie to come out. But it obviously had
Horrible.
because they're going to make a number 2. And we can talk about my beef with the movie, but the thing being is Bloodshot's probably the most well known. But I love Rye, and I'll tell you the reason why I like Rye is because one of the first Valiant comics I had was him taking on Mother God.
Yeah,
and the weight and the gravity of the situation that he was in. He's like, hey, I'm fixing for these guys to get away, and for Earth, my kid, my wife, I'm going to have to sacrifice myself. And he gave it all. And then the other thing that speaks to me about Valiant Comics in general, and segueing from Rye, is the fact that they left their characters dead. So there's actually gravity to the situation at hand. When you resurrect characters all the time, it totally takes away from their story arc. And so with Valiant Comics, think about Shadow Man, and it was in Unity that they said he's going to die in 1990, whatever.
99.
And so he did. And of course, when they rebooted everything, it all came back. But yeah, so I mean, there are just so many different dynamics, and I think that is lost in large part because people say, "Oh, well, you got Bloodshot 1," which is Barry Windsor Smith art, so nothing taken. I've got 15 copies of the thing, so Turok 1, awesome Bart Sears, right? And by the way, I just commissioned Bart Sears to do me an exo. But the thing with those particular comics, they were overpublished. Hold on a second. I'm froze here. Can you hear me? Okay, there we go.
Can.
All right. So they were overpublished, but sure, everything in the 90s was overpublished. And so, that's just one of those things. And so if you just all of a sudden take away from that, I don't want to hear nobody talk about Darkhawk 1. I don't want to hear nobody talk about Sleepwalker 1 and every other new FOMO thing that comes out, because everything in the 90s. You've got Youngblood. Now they're announcing Prophet is going to have its own movie. So now all of a sudden, Youngblood 2 is a hot book. All these things, and of course, Rye, and then you got the glossy and versus the matte version of that. But there's just so much depth, I think, to the characters. In how they, interact with each other. Valiant, for those of you who don't know, is the third largest connected universe. Obviously, Marvel and DC being the first one. So that's no small feat to keep all that stuff and keep it in continuity. So I mentioned Turok 1 and Bloodshot 1. How many Turok 1s and Bloodshot 1s do you
own? 20 to 30 probably. It's really hard to pass up a comic book when you see it somewhere in a dollar bin and they're doing a sale.
Exactly.
And we are those archivists. We're those people that want to have them, give them away, and coddle them. They're our babies, it's something that we had as a youth that we could connect with and get into, something that we look forward to every month. Nowadays we binge everything.
Right.
We get really upset if we have to wait a week to watch an episode of TV. Well, God, 25 years ago we had to wait. Well, we still have to. We can't binge comics. We had to wait every month, or 6 weeks in some books, and still waiting for Black Cat and Spider-Man to finish up. So
well, and I think that aids and abets people having impatience and being willing to take garbage writing. So what I mean by that is when you had to keep the people interested from month to month. So when you finished, I had to say, man, I can't wait till the next month. And when next month came around, you went and pulled it off the newsstand, or you went and pulled it out of the comic shop, and you said, "Boom! I can't wait to read this." Okay, now because everybody binge watches or binge reads everything, you can have garbage writing for the most part, and they're like, oh, they'll just soldier through it and they'll just read it because hey, it's the whole story. Whereas before, they had to keep you captivated and coming back every single month. Um, and I think that and so like what my pull list as an example is every month. I mean, every week it's pretty thick, and I look at it and I say, okay, which one can I not wait to read? And if there's something that I'm dreading reading, it's gone, because there's just so much good stuff. And especially when you're
Yeah.
talking about going back to the older stuff that you might not be familiar with, or that invokes some kind of nostalgia, or if you're a collector, no, Justin, you've got some foreign variants. If you want to put those up, we can show those. But things like foreign variants, which is kind of a newer deal. But there's definitely some of those available for Valiant Comics. Let me give you the solo layout there.
So this is Bloodshot Reborn, and by Bliss Comics. They are a French publisher of Valiant, and they do these amazing hardcovers. Yeah, they're gorgeous, and I get really my collective mentality. I mean, I've gotten all of the free comic book day variants. They've done 3 years or 4 years now. I have a friend over there, and then he'll send me like 2 or 3 of those copies, and I've got a lot of the Turkish variants, the Mexico variants, Spain. Yeah, it's. I'm really surprised my wife is still married. So just the shipping alone from some of the foreign countries, is enough to deter a person. So
Well, I was talking to a guy last night about foreign collecting, because that's kind of something I've started doing a little more of, and just the passion in his collecting voice, which is really speaks to me, because to me, and everybody collects their way, so I'm not dogging. Just like with Valiant, I just said, hey, keep an open mind. Maybe you can read and get some good material to read from Valiant Comics. I'm not trying to all of a sudden make everybody a Valiant collector, nor are we all trying to make somebody a foreign collector. I just think that there's so many niches inside of the comic collecting deal that people do themselves a disservice by just thinking about the latest Daredevil 25 that Elektra, puts on the Daredevil suit only to go back, in the solicitations 2 issues later and change it up. If you're making your living off of selling spec books, great. That's you. But I'm talking about for the collector, the guy who or gal who is just, loves the character, loves the writing, and likes keeping the stuff around. Collect what you want and find what it is, whether it's foreign variants, Valiant, whatever.
yeah,
Collect it and don't care what anybody else says, because now there are so many people out there. And I'll give you an example, because like with Justin, I never would have met Justin or Christian from Elving Comics. I don't know if you know him. He does IG live sales, but he's a huge Valiant guy. Matter
huh?
of fact, just about every live claim sale he does on IG, he's got a Valiant shirt on. And I've bought some of the books. This Arch and Armstrong Gold Zero, that's signed twice, once by Bob Layton and once by Barry Windsor Smith. I bought from him raw and got it
Huh.
graded. But he's a huge Valiant fan. But we never would have connected with each other. So back in the day when I collected comics, obviously being nerdy was not in fashion. You kept that strictly a secret. Um, so you go, you collect comics? Hey, let's talk about it later. Type deal.
Yeah,
But to know people all across the world, you mentioned ordering stuff from people in France, all across the world that have the same kind of hobbies as you. In the divisive culture of which we live in, not to digress into politics or anything like that, but in the divisive culture we live in, it is very refreshing to find people that you can connect with. And we don't necessarily agree on everything. We haven't even talked about other things, but we're finding that we have something in common, and therefore we're talking about that. obviously, or I say obviously, maybe not everybody knows. Maybe they're new to collecting, or Valiant's kind of a dirty word to them because it's not Marvel. I find that even DC people, are shunned or shamed by Marvel people. But that's kind of another subject. The With the Valiant, Jim Shooter, brings over all this huge talent. I mean, they're putting out great content, starting with gold key properties of Solar, Man of the Atom, Magnus the Robot Fighter, and well, at that time it was Turok. Was it Son of Stone or Man of Stone? But it became Dinosaur Hunter, that everybody knows. And so he started with those properties and built into making things like Eternal Warrior and making Archer and Armstrong and Bloodshot and Harbinger and all the Psyots, with Harbinger. And so it just built this whole universe around these, three characters. And, it was great. And as with most things that are good, they come to an end at some time. Jim Shooter leaves. It starts falling apart, and eventually Acclaim carries the title. Interesting to note that Acclaim, when they bought Valiant Comics, they were really ahead of their time. They were just at the wrong time. So a good idea is just as important as the timing on instituting that good idea. And they had the absolute worst timing. They hit a lull in the market, too much debt, and things fell apart. But what I mean by them being ahead of their time, you have media empires like Disney and AT&T now that own all these properties. That's what Acclaim was trying to do with Valiant Comics. They were using the comics that you were reading to make you play video games, and then vice versa. Just really, really bad timing. Now, if you want wonky reads, read the Acclaim comics. Ninjak Takes the Cake, where you just say, "Hey, Ninjak," and you turn into Ninjak. I mean, total departure from the character as he had been. And but it's just fun. And so fast forward to 2012, and this consortium of sorts picks it up, and Dinesh Diasani, am I pronouncing his last name right?
Shamdasani, yeah.
Okay. So I
And
mean,
Jason Katari, his friend.
yeah, go ahead. I mean, if you want to carry on the story, I mean, that's fine. I mean, you probably know more about it than I do.
So they had, so Dinesh, my knowledge and him being an acquaintance goes back a long time. We were part of a bulletin board system or forum, and when there was no Valiant comics to talk about, everyone talked about it on there. And so fast forward, he goes to, he starts to amass some people to invest in it and purchase it when it goes to auction. And he's in Florida in about 2005, 2006. And the judge that is overseeing the bankruptcy and sale of it thought it was going to go for like 60 or 80 grand. Well, the bidding starts getting pretty intensive. And another person actually won it, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. This is also 13 years ago. I believe it was John Tadeo who started a comic called Zoom Suit that kind of looked like Exo Manowar and Iron Man. But I believe that he wasn't able to fulfill his obligation to it. And so since Jason and Dinesh were the second highest bidders, they were able to acquire it. And, at the same time, Dynamite or Dynamic Forces put out a ash can at San Diego Comic Con called, the Valiant Intellectual Properties Sneak Peek that was misspelled. And so they used the word Harbinger, and it didn't look anything like the character. And they used Eternal Warrior, and it was all drawn by Jay Lee. They were trying to stranglehold the property, the names, the trademark names, away. And so there was a fight for 5 years before they could comfortably put out comics when they secured the trademarks. So there's a lot of shady past of other people trying to leverage names of Shadow Man and Eternal Warrior and Geomancer, all those names that we're familiar with the Valiant universe.
Mm-hmm.
There were some people that were trying to just take it, even
Yeah.
though it was acquired in a bankruptcy auction.
So, and interesting side note that Dynamite now has the properties of Turok, Solar, and Magnus. I think they still publish a comic. Dynamite, basically, all they do is Red Sonja and Vampirella. They do 100 copies of that, covers of that. But they do have the old Gold Key properties. I think Dark Horse at one time had them as well. And so Valiant,
Yeah.
when they rebooted, didn't have those three original characters that were a core part of the original Valiant universe. But they built on it anyway. And so the interesting thing with that reboot was that typically in a reboot, and especially in this modern age, people are tempted to go stray from the character's core, premise and core functions and how they acted back in the day. Let's make them bolder. Let's make them this. Let's make them that. Let's make a statement with them. Okay. That was not the case, at least in my mind, with Valiant when they rebooted it. It was so close to the original characters. And if anything, they improved them. And I give you an example of that with Eternal Warrior. So now with Eternal Warrior, you got this battle axe. That wasn't really a deal with him back in the day. So, they improved on things like that. Exo, Robert Venditti writing Exo. I mean, killer. I mean, they brought in so much great talent. Of course, we mentioned Clayton Crane earlier. His early work, his first published work was Shadow Man, an acclaimed Valiant comic, which I have a copy of. And as a matter of fact, you can't really see it. It's up here, but I went to a Clayton Crane signing a couple months ago and got him to sign Shadow Man number, I think that's 19. Yeah. And it's got the Ku Klux Klan on there. That's like, I want to get books that he probably never sees to sign. And of course, back then he signed it K, ironically enough, with the Klan on there, right? But yeah, he signed it with a K instead of a C. And but he went, originally, but when he signed it for me, it was with a C. And I got an Exo from the Vendetti run that he drew, Exo 11 up there. I got him to sign it also. But when they brought him back, they had Clayton Crane, Robert Vendetti, Jeff Lemire, Miko Sion. I mean, just so much talent. Matt Kent, all these guys and gals were just killing it.
Louis LaRosa.
What's that?
Louis LaRosa. He's my favorite artist with modern Valiant.
Yeah.
I think I have 14 or 16 of his covers and maybe 40 pages of interiors.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, I have the entire Bloodshot 25 issue that he had drawn. So I have the cover and all 22 pages of that.
And so talking about Bloodshot, one of the things that I felt like improved on Bloodshot was that they never, in the past that I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, what I recall, I don't really recall Bloodshot having some kind of kryptonite, if you will, for his abilities, meaning that what could really slow him down. It got wonky in the claim days, but we're not counting that. That's not canon, so to speak. But when they rebooted Bloodshot, he had this deal where he had to eat, was it protein, to feed those nanites. And so he'll get wasted essentially in a battle trying to pull himself back together. And he's got there's one issue where he's fighting the psyops and stuff that he goes to his meat house and he's just eating up all the raw meat.
Yeah, so I think it's that taking in the protein allows him to regenerate faster.
Mm-hmm.
That's my theory on it. I can't remember which issue of the first run of Bloodshot where he just was in a field and ate a cow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, things like that, they actually, improved on the characters. And I think that's because the people, the cast that you had at Valiant that was putting stuff together another example of you can tell that their love and appreciation for the characters is in Star Wars. Everybody's raving about Dave Filoni, but if you ever listen to Dave Filoni, he is a huge Star Wars fan. And it shows in The Mandalorian, whereas opposed to, say, the movies, people are all up in arms about it because it's really a departure somewhat of the core Star Wars theory. And I think that's because of his love for Star Wars, and it shows. And Disney, hello, McFly, hello, look at what Mandalorian's doing for your Disney Plus service. So I think that if some of these creators, and we're talking about Valiant, so we'll go into the modern era of Valiant. But I think that some of these creators, if they would just quit trying to push their agendas and they would hire people with talent and hire people that love these characters, it would show up in the work and people would buy into it, just like they did when Dinesh brought all the stuff back in 2012. It's there. I'll give you another example of this. Boom Studios. Boom right now is killing it. Okay. They've got Something's Killing the Children. They had the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and the TMNT crossover. They're doing Once and Future right now. I mean, they just got so many hits. Why? Because Mr. Ritchie, who is heading up Boom Studios, is a comic collector first and foremost. And so he's thinking from that lens that, hey, if I know what they want. Let's give them, like, I'm the ultimate customer. Give them what I would want if I was buying those comics, and they will buy it. Okay. So fast forward to Valiant of today. Valiant has very few titles that are currently out. Bloodshot's out, and it's okay. I mean, it's not Bloodshot of old, but it's okay. EXO, Dennis Hopeless Haslam is writing it. Jury's still out. We only got issue number 2, so we'll see how it goes. Rye's pretty good.
Right.
Dan Abnett is writing Rye, so it's pretty good. It's like this sci-fi Western type. But now we've got Harbinger coming out and Ninjak coming out. And they were talking about with Ninjak, or not Ninjak, but Harbinger, oh, we're going to have so much diversity and we're going to have this and we're going to have that. And I'm like, wait a minute. Did you even read Harbinger of old? They've always had diversity. You had this fat chick who's the head, one of the head people. What are you talking about? Need diversity.
Yeah. And then they had Torque was handicap in the Josh Dysart run. He was wheelchair bound.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, my mind's blown. I'm like, what are you talking about? Did you even read the stuff? I mean, and so it's kind of like with Rian Johnson in The Last Jedi. Did you ever read a Star Wars novel? I mean, come on, man. You know that Broom Boy can't move that thing without some kind of training? Oh, boy. We're passionate because we've got time, money invested in these characters and years of reading the comics and seeing how the people took them. And so Sith Lordly, I started talking his lingo, man. I started talking a little Star Wars in here, and I'll take the prequels.
Yep, right there.
Exactly. And so Return of the Jedi was the last good Star Wars movie. We now got, go woke and go broke. And, I'm not trying to make a statement or anything. I don't care what you do in your personal time. If you want to make a new character that is trans, gay, a gun rights activist, I don't care. Okay, make them. Okay, make them part of the universe. I don't care. But don't take a total departure from all these other characters that never were that way. And so you talk about Iceman with X-Men. He was a ladies' man the whole night since 1963. And now all of a sudden he's a gay character. Again, I don't care. But now his superpower is being gay instead of just being an Omega level mutant.
Right.
When they kind of rebooted stuff, Ninjak became Ninja K. We were talking about how they actually kind of improved on some of this stuff. I liked how they did that aspect of it, that he was Ninja K, as opposed to the rest of them. So, what'd
That's
you
kind
think
of like
about
all
that,
the
or was that
James
too far of
Bonds,
it?
you know. No, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think it was a far departure. I really liked Matt Kent's take on that. And I thought it was great how they kind of showed a progression of different operatives for MI5. And it's no different than, the James Bond canon. They're all
Mm-hmm.
007. It doesn't really matter. They're just different times, throughout the
Right.
course of that existence. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so let's see, deep dive. The original three movies are way better than the new ones, but it does laugh about the FX. Yeah, we were. I was on a show last night, and we were talking about the Hulk. The Lou Ferrigno Hulk back in the day, and so they had a made-for-TV movie with him and Thor. And I remember watching that because I was a huge Hulk fan as a kid. And as a side note, I met Lou Ferrigno last year, and he's still intimidating. Okay, uh, he's a big guy. Um, but so they had this him and Thor, and I'm sitting there screaming at the TV, is like, that's not what Thor's like. What's going on with this? But the reality of it is, back then we just appreciated getting some kind of love towards these comic characters, because that wasn't a thing. The MCU's kind of made it acceptable that everybody now knows who Captain America and Thor and all these other things are. But years ago we really didn't have all that. So um
It's common vernacular in our culture nowadays.
mhm.
So, you know, people that 10 years ago would have never, or well, Iron Man came out 10 years ago, let's say, 15 years ago, that you didn't talk about Avengers, you didn't talk about, Thor, Captain America at the dinner table or with your friends, unless you were in this niche comic book, fandom at the time. Everyone knew
Mhm.
Batman from Michael Keaton,
Right.
but, it became more mainstream.
Sure. Well, and the amazing thing about Marvel, and I think that that's where the people that are going to be publishing the Valiant movies, because now Valiant, the people that own them, are more worried about publishing movies than they are comics, but they don't understand the comics is what leads the people to the movies. So it's really
Right,
cheap advertising, right? You're paying people to buy your billboard. What other industry can you do that with? And that is
right,
what they're missing the boat on. But that's kind of a side note. But the reason why they started off with Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor is because those are the few properties that Marvel, before Disney bought them, had to work with. Because they had sold the rights
right,
to Universal and Fox, and all the popular characters were gone. And so they started it out
right.
and proved that unpopular characters done the right way could be super mainstream and make a lot of money, and they've done it. So hats off to Disney and Marvel Studios for killing it. But I think that, like talking about Bloodshot, it came out at the wrong time. Obviously, I didn't like the fact that I guess Vin Diesel is too big of a character to make him actually have hair. Uh, hey, I've got nothing against bald guys, the same haircut, but this is not Bloodshot, and it wasn't until like the last couple of scenes that he started turning the white, type deal. Um, this is the Bloodshot that I know, as far as the sideburns, whether you want to call him Michael
Yeah.
Lazarus or Ray Garrison, whichever one you want to call him. But yeah, so that's kind of as a side note, but that's a small sticking point. It was interesting that Paramount picked up the rights to Harbinger. So now the problem with having a totally connected universe is that now you have different studios, and they're not going to talk nice to each other. I mean, look at Marvel and Spider-Man and Sony. So
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting to see what pans out because, they couldn't even use the word mutant, to reference any X-Men in the Marvel movies because it was owned by a different company, so.
Mhm.
But
So,
we'll
are you
see. Hopefully
currently
it pans
reading
out.
any of the current runs that are being put out by Valiant, or are you just getting the older stuff from other days?
No, I have been collecting and reading all of the new Valiant since May of 2012.
Hmm.
I have, up until this year, every variant, every store exclusive, every con exclusive. I don't know, 18 long boxes that is one copy of everything.
I see.
Um,
I have six, and I
it's kind
thought I was crazy.
and this bloodshot I held up came out this year, in conjunction with the movie, and the limited edition. This was given out as a press at the press junket. There were two covers of this, a yellow one and then this particular black one. And I, up until this year, I had one copy of every variant they've released, even some from Belgium and France, as they were in English, but they were given out at Comic Cons. And I'd buy 25 of them and have them shipped to the US and provide other collectors with copies. And yeah, other than the golden tickets and the Quantum and Woody #1 second print that was a one
Mhm.
of one, I have everything. So
So there are some ghosts out there as far as collecting Valiant, and you probably could tell us a little bit more about those. But a lot of the stuff, like these I got personally at cons. These I picked up on eBay on the cheap. Um, but a lot of the bigger stuff I have to purchase on eBay because going to cons or going to shops. I go all over Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee. I was in Missouri last week or week before last, and so going all over these places like that, you just don't find a lot of the big Valiant, like the gold key, the gold stuff from the '90s and that type of thing. And I can understand it. If they're not going to sell it, they don't want to keep it, but. So I love digging through the long boxes and find things like the armories, armories, the armorines. I'll get it out in a minute. Um, which was a neat little series that they had, and Acclaim came out with was it 4-part miniseries?
yeah,
Um,
4-part.
and 4 is a ghost. It's kind of hard to get a hold of. I found either issue 2 or issue 3 in a 50 cent bin 2
Uh-huh.
weeks ago. So me personally, I get as excited about that as I do picking up some, big thing of the week, right? Because I'm like, boom, I didn't have to go on eBay and type it in. I mean, it was that thrill of the hunt. And that's the deal. One of the deals with me and the hobby in general is the thrill of the hunt, is being able to find that book and go, all right, I've accomplished something. Uh, just about, which I have X-Men, which are far more popular than everybody. Um, Deep Dive says words. I like them every day. My tel-
I
my
trip over them all the
telepathy
time too.
my telepathy's on the fritz, and so I'm just going to have to work with what I got. But talking back about diversity, here is a diverse comic as if you ever seen one, right? So you're talking about Giant Size X-Men #1.
Right.
So when this came out, I mean, think about that, 1975. So when this came out, you had a German, you had a Russian. I mean, we still had Soviet Union, right? You had a Canadian, you
Right.
had an African, an Indian, uh, Japanese guy, an Irish guy. All these mixes in this one comic book. Yes, it was a departure from the original team, and I can understand where some people were like, "That's the OG team. That's the one I want." But I don't remember there ever being a thing, and I certainly never had a problem with. I mean, this is my X-Men team, right? Growing up, these are the guys because of my age, because I'm 42. These are the guys that I remember.
Right.
Okay, and so it wasn't forced diversity. I mean, in the sense that, okay, they didn't all of a sudden make Cyclops a certain way or whatever. They just made new characters and said, hey, here they are. And guess
Right.
what? People bought it. You know, people just don't like having things forced on them, and you're never going to change people's minds that way. And Sith Lordley made the comment, said, "I don't like reading comics that insult my intelligence." Exactly. I mean, I've got enough problems in normal life without having to read something and sit there. I'm going, of course they insult my intelligence. If I'm dumb enough to read something where they're insulting my intelligence and pay them to insult my intelligence, I ought to be shot. So, it's just one of those things. And so we were talking about Ghost, and I mentioned Armorines 4. What are some other ghosts that you know about that are out there?
So a modern ghost is this one right here, which is Exo Manowar 15.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 1 in 50, first of all, and it's got this gorgeous cover by Kotaki. He's done a lot of Magic the Gathering cards. He
Uh-huh.
lives in Hawaii. But what sets this one apart is the interiors are from Quantum and Woody #1. So getting a 1 in 50 of the comic is very difficult now. I have 3 of the regular 1 in 50s, and then I have 2 of the errors. And these are they're on recalledcomics.com under the Valiant section. It's a known error. A lot of them were thought to have been destroyed, but I know of a couple dozen of the copies that had filtered out somehow.
Huh.
And so that's one of my favorite books as a ghost. You mentioned your Bloodshot sketch cover by Tim Seeley on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
There have been like 4 different sketch covers that had too glossy of a finish to where they wouldn't take
Mm-hmm.
ink.
Right.
Um, there was a Rye mask variant that the eyes wouldn't pop out, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's been recalled. There are quite a few comics that slip through the QCQA and get out in the public before they realize that they're not quite what their intention was. So
Well, the old one back in the day was Secret Wars 1 with the Blue Galactus. And so there's actually more of the errors out there, I think, of the Blue Galactus than there is of the regular color Galactus, because by the time they sent the new stuff out, everybody had them and they just didn't send them back in.
right,
Um, but so, yeah, this is Tim Seeley, who writes Bloodshot currently. This is a sketch I had him do of the split of Rye and Bloodshot. Now, one of the big things from Rise Zero from back in the day, first appearance of Bloodshot, was there's the connection of the blood of heroes. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when they rebooted the universe, did they ever really just come out and say that Rye is from the blood of heroes in the new universe, or no?
wow, that was so many comic books ago. Normally,
I,
I can retain that canon history a lot better, but don't. I can't remember. I'd have to look through Bloodshot Zero that Matt Kent had done
I,
and
I
see.
don't think that they did. I think that I mean, basically, they kind of hint at it. And comic book G Spot is saying no. So, but
No,
yeah,
yeah,
I think they kind of hinted at it because if you go to 4000, was it 4000 AD? Bloodshot kind of goes back in time at some point there. And then they've got
right,
now with the Rye Currents run, they've got, blood father has, is inhabited his body. So,
right.
and
Talking
he's
about Rye being one of your favorites, man. The Clayton Crane run where he did all the digital painting and all. My God, that's one of the most gorgeous books that's been put out in the last 10 years.
Oh yeah, I mean it's awesome work there. I think David Mack, didn't he do a lot of those covers for Rye as well during
He
that
did,
time?
yeah, he did some. Yeah, he did do several variant covers, but man, those interiors are just
Oh yeah.
They're just gorgeous.
Yeah, it's just killer. That Valiant's kind of out there by itself and has zero talent. But I mean, we've been calling out some historic names. We mentioned Don Perlin, Barry Windsor Smith, and those guys earlier. But my goodness, I mean, the people just in the reboot. I mean, they're just really great reads. Exo Manowar. I would highlight the Robert Vendetti run, which is Exo Volume 3. I
Right.
would highly recommend that. Get it in trade or buy it digitally. I don't really like to read comics digitally, but to each their own. Be a cheap way to get it. And so the Ninja K run was pretty good. Did Matt Kent do that one?
Yeah, Matt Kent did that run.
Uh, and so he mentioned the Rye run where Clayton Crane was drawing it. Definitely another fantastic run. Um, Eternal Warrior really didn't have a long run in the newer universe. I mean, you had the Wrath of the Eternal Warrior, and you had the Eternal Warrior. He really didn't have a long one of his own self. I tell you another thing we didn't mention. We did mention the Bloodshot movie is the Ninjak versus the Valiant Universe movie. Um, so I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I have a
So
lot of the art from the comic issues too. So
right. So the up here next to that Armorines #1 is a signed copy from all the cast of the Ninjak versus the Valiant Universe, and so which
nice.
include Jason David Frank, which more people know him as Tommy the Green Ranger, because he's the one that played Bloodshot. And so, uh, you know,
Right.
it wasn't $1 billion production or anything like that, but it was good. It was good for me to see the cast of characters, come to life, so to speak, in a not totally cheesy way. Uh,
Right.
um,
Well, Bat in the Sun does some really good stuff
they
for
did.
not being tied to a major production studio. The Shonkies do it all themselves, and they do some very quality storytelling. So
Mm-hmm. They do. They do. And so a lot of these down here I've got are the gold editions, or Bloodshot Zero. Um, this is another one of those that I can't help but pick up the regular cover if I see it in a dollar bin somewhere. But this is the gold copy. I don't have the Arrow variant. You probably do.
yeah, I've got two.
So, so yeah, Joe Quesada art, and then of course two of my favorites with Valiant right there going at it together. Um, I showed this one off
Speak,
before. What's that?
Speaking of Casada, I mean, he got his first work in the Nintendo books before, the
We didn't even
superheroes.
mention we didn't even mention the Nintendo books. So, that came before all the connected universe stuff started. That was kind of their starting things. That's one of the runs that I've been putting together. I actually have Super Mario 1, Elvine Comics, ironically enough, the guy that I mentioned earlier that does IG live claim sales, who's a Valiant collector. I bought it from him, and it's on its way to me. But the Super Mario, the Legends of Zelda, the Game Boy stuff, and those things that they had back then. I'm fixing to get a hold of the Kraft mac and cheese uh, deal.
Stegosaurus Rex, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, Steve Ditko did art for Nintendo with Jim also. So, I mean, you're talking Steve Ditko, Jim Casada, these big names that got they did work on licensed property. Nintendo, Zelda, WWF at the time had comic books. And yeah, it's just incredible. So,
Yeah, and I think that's forgot about. Kind of as an aside note, super. Oh, well, what's the DC cartoon back in the day? Super Hero Friends.
Super Friends.
Yeah, Super Friends. There you go.
Yeah.
They had Jack Kirby did the art on the stuff, and most people don't think Jack Kirby with
Wow.
something kind of as an aside like that, but I picked him up just because it was kind of cool from that standpoint. But think about Steve Ditko and Spider-Man and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, he was writing about, and that was the thing with Jim Shooter. As much as people diss and hate on the man ran a tight ship. He was like a golden age of Marvel Comics, getting out on time, putting out great content. I will hold it against him that essentially he launched the big event stuff, with Secret Wars being the first of them, that now all comics want to do is events. I will hold that against him, but other than that, I mean, he gets kicked out at Marvel and he goes and gets some people together. And as much as people say, hey, I hate working for the man went and called all these guys around and they came to work for him. So were they just that desperate for work? Or are they wanting to basically give the, middle finger to Marvel and say, hey, look, you're trying to push me out thinking I ain't got no gas left in the tank. I'll show you. We'll go over here and we'll start another company. And, people like Barry Windsor Smith and Don Perlin and others that were over there. And then, of course, later on, you had Bob Layton came on board, known for his Iron Man work, Demon in the Bottle, and that type of stuff. But you had Bart Sears and Joe Quesada, we keep mentioning, and others that were just a great part of, I felt like, pretty continuous, if that's a word. If it ain't, it is now. Comics.
Yeah, I mean, they had their house style with the Doc Martens watercolors. Everything was painted. It
Mm-hmm.
looked, if you opened one title or another, it looked the same. It looked great. And they focus on the storytelling, and you know they go hand in hand. You need a good story, you need great art, and you need people that are passionate about those comics. So
Mm-hmm. Well, the art brings you in, but the story keeps you, right? Because people will pick up a story
yeah,
because a book because the cover looks good, but they're not going to keep picking up that book if it's garbage on the inside of it. So, um,
right.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as big name for the times, kind of younger guys at that point in the industry, hardcore number one with Jim Lee. I mean, was that the only one that some of those 90s image people did?
Yeah, apparently Jim Lee owed Bob Layton a favor, and Bob Layton called it in to get him to do that cover. So
Yeah. And it's funny because, and I mentioned this earlier about trying to find books that the artist or writer, when I go, because I like signed comic books too. Uh, and so when you go to one of these cons and present the book, I want to present something that maybe they don't see all the time.
right.
And so I was going to go to a Jim Lee signing. Well, I think he was at one of the cons that I'd planned on going to this year. And of course, this little thing called Corona happened. But yeah, anyway, Hardcore number one was one of the ones I wanted to get him to sign. Now, as much as I've got all these X-Men, because I have X-Men volume 1 through 5. So there's 544 comics in the first volume alone. And so you have, and then I've got X-Men, if the single titled X-Men, which started with the greatest selling comic book of all time, X-Men number one, which is of course Jim Lee. I have all those too. So you would think, okay, he would get that book. No, I wanted Hardcore number one to get signed because he probably doesn't see that all that much.
Yeah, I can't imagine he sees it very often. I do see periodically online people will have him sign that comic, and it makes me, pulls on my heartstrings a little bit because it's nice to see other people take a book like that and have signed. So
Yeah, because Jim Lee's $50 to get a stick these days. So
is
I
he?
mean,
So
yeah. So when you're talking about $50, and then a lot of times people will send them off to get graded, so you're talking about another $30 with shipping and grading. You got a little investment there for a hardcore number one that you can find in the dollar bin in most places.
right. Yeah. I'd imagine he sees a lot of like X-Men 268 and whatnot get put in front of him. So is that the yeah, I think that's the right issue that I'm thinking of.
So as far as probably if we're going by prices, and here's my little plug for gocollect.com for all your pricing needs and values for comics there. But if if you're talking about just value, monetary value, not sentimental value or anything like that, but monetary value, what would be your most valuable Valiant comic book?
Oh, I don't know because oh, probably just a couple of the different error books that they have. Yeah, I mean, I've got a Divinity that was given away at the Vans Warp Tour 2 years ago. That there are only a couple of copies out there, maybe 3 to 5 that people know about.
Mhm.
There's a gold book that's very hard to come by, and it sells, between $300 and $500. I don't know that I don't the Bloodshot Platinum. There's people that have 9/8s on eBay that are trying to sell them for $5,000. Which is a little inflated.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure what the most expensive one I have is, because I enjoy the sentimental value going on with them, and that I've been collecting them for 25 years. And
So,
my
so
kids will
talking
bury them with me.
about sentimental value, what would be the most sentimental value that you said, man, I'd have to be destitute on the street before I'd sell this book?
So I have a Solar #1 from
Mm.
Valiant that is signed and remarked by Barry Windsor Smith, Don Perlin, and Jim Shooter.
Whoa.
Yeah, and
Did you get
so
that personally, or did
Don
you?
Perlin drew a little personally. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
sent copies to have signed and whatnot, and they remarked 7 of them, and so that's probably one of my favorites. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely a cool one. And I like to get stuff in person because it brings that attachment. You're sitting there talking to the artist. You're talking about your vision for what you might would like to see on a comic, and they bring it to life on that art. But sometimes you just have to buy it on eBay, like these right here, or like this one over here, Don Perlin. I mean,
yeah,
Don Perlin's what, 81, 82 now?
yeah. I mean, he had a health scare last year, the year before, and we're he's been around in the comic industry for a long time, and I really like to see. I mean, he did a cover for Bloodshot 25.
Hmm.
So I'm happy to see that he's still getting a little work when he's able to. Last I heard, he was doing some art for the Jacksonville, Florida sports newspaper. He
Huh.
would do little drawings, kind of like what you would see that are political, but he would do for sports. So last I heard.
So, talking about 5,000, you mentioned one of the Bloodshot comics. What about you don't have an Eternal Warrior axe, do you?
I do.
Oh, no, you don't.
Yeah, I could. It would take about 40 seconds for me to go grab it. Can you feel that time?
Yeah, yeah, I can talk while you go get it if you can
Okay.
get it. Don't run with sharp objects.
Well, I'll try not to run back with a sharp object.
Well, yeah. So while he's going to get that, what I'm talking about that when they were coming out with the Wrath of the Eternal Warrior comic book as a giveaway, incentive, whatever you want to call it, to comic shops, Valiant sent these battle axes, which in the 2012 reboot of Valiant, the battle axe is the Eternal Warrior's main weapon. So they sent a battle axe that has Wrath of the Eternal Warrior on the blade, and these are extremely rare because the few that went out, I contact. Well, I'll tell them that part in a minute, but they went out to retailers, and retailers have since turned around and sold them. So this is one object you got to have an eye to find stuff like that when it comes about, because you just don't see them every day. There's one that is currently on eBay for $5,000. I want it, but I don't know that I want it that bad. And so, but the guy, whoever is selling it for $5,000. I have tried to lowball it several different times to no avail. And I'll share some of that as he gets back. I do appreciate everybody for showing up and hanging around with us for this time, talking Valiant comics, which Vincent McLean, the comic machine, I won't hold that against you that you don't have a Valiant comic. I have a load of them that I can send you to give you some good reading material. But smash that like button, hit the subscribe button. We are only 10 subscribers away from hitting that 600 subscriber mark, in which case I'm going to be giving away a New Mutants 98 9.4 CGC slab. So share the channel out with your friends. Subscribe me up on some of your shadow accounts and that type of stuff. I would appreciate it. And we've been talking with Justin on about collecting Valiants. Thank you, Sith Lordly. Hey, Sith Lordly, I'm doing a lot of these shows talking with people about kind of niche collection deals. Hey, we need to get together and talk some Star Wars. We'll show off some of our Star Wars collection. Yeah, and so I hear crackling in the background, so he must be walking back with the battle axe. I encouraged him not to run because it would be really bad to hear, oh! And then somebody fall out. That'd be a really bad way to end the day. So that ends the interview, right? At that point. And so, look, if we do that, we're going to have to try not to get sidetracked on Civil War history. But I think we can do it. Star Wars is blowing up right now, so a lot of good stuff out there, especially the Dark Horse stuff. We talk about the old Marvel stuff too. As an aside, Mastodon, hello, how are you doing today? Thank you for showing up. Comic book G Spot just showed up, or just had to leave rather. So I do appreciate him for being with us. And he's back. He's going to catch a breather.
So I actually could not get to it quickly enough. Okay. I'll put a photo up on Instagram and tag you in a little bit.
Yeah.
I did grab my Rise skateboard.
I saw that
35 of.
That is sick.
Or 30. Yeah, so I've got like Jeff Lemire, Neil Adams, Jim Mafu, David Mack, this Ruben Najira, who's actually the skateboarder, signed it at C2E2 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
But I could get to this quicker. I got a cut, and I don't know if it was a paper cut or from the axe when I was trying to get it. But yeah, I'll put a photo up of the axe this afternoon.
Yeah, so if you're not following Justin, Collecting Valiant on IG, his IG handle is in the description, the video below. But while you were gone, I was talking about this battle axe. So before I get into saying what I'm going to say, you're not the guy that's trying to sell it on eBay, are you?
No, I won't sell mine. Mine was a Christmas gift from my father-in-law.
Oh, wow. So there's one guy that's selling his on eBay for $5,000. I have tried to lowball him several times. He is having none of it. It just stays up on eBay forever and ever. So I even contacted Valiant to see if they had some laying around the home office before, they of course moved out of their home office, whatever. So, yeah, so they said they didn't have any, but they put me in contact with several shops that might still have theirs. And that never yielded any fruit. Most of the shops were in New York, and when I was contacted, it was in the middle of the lockdown. So I'm going to have to go back and pull that email back up and see if I can kind of, because I offered the guy $1,000. I offered the guy $1,000 on eBay for his, but he was not having any of it.
Wow.
So it sent out to the
That's
comic
incredible.
shop. Now the guy on eBay, I will say that he did get it signed by Bob Layton, but I mean I don't know that that's $5,000 worth of stuff right there. I can buy an awful lot of rare books for $5,000. What's going on, Kenneth Bird? How are you? Mastodon says that board looks familiar. Have you been to Baltimore Con with it?
Not with that. I got all these signatures at C2E2.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been to Baltimore. I've been to San Diego, um, Emerald City, C2E2, Planet Comic Con. Hit a lot of shows in my lifetime, but I've never been to Baltimore.
So did you do C2E2 this year?
No, I didn't do it. I haven't done it since 2018. I didn't do
Okay.
it in 2019 or 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was the last big show before Corona, shut everything down. And I was like this close to going. So the next to the last show was in Dallas, Texas, and Bob Layton was going to be there. Bart Sears was going to be there. I think maybe Jim Shooter even was going to be there. I mean, it was just like tickling all those, Valiant, tingles for me. And it was
Sure.
on Valentine's weekend, and it didn't happen. So, and of course, then because at the time I was like, oh, well, no big deal. Most of them are going to be at some other show I'm going to be at, because I had 20 plus shows lined up for this year. And that didn't happen.
That's a rock star right there. I tell you, that's dedication.
So now I have been to a couple of shows since then, but they're all small scale shows. Huntsville Comic Con in Huntsville, Alabama. Chris Claremont was there, and they had several people that were there, vendors, and of course they were all spaced out, so it wasn't quite as busy, quite as many vendors, and everybody had to wear masks and all that kind of good stuff. But so there was a small show, and it was really more just like a gathering of, but it was different vendors from different places, and all in this back of this Family Life Center at a church in Pearl, Mississippi. And I went up there, and man, it was packed. There were so many people up in there, and I was talking to one of the vendors who was out of state, and I said, "This shows right here the pent up desire for Comic Con." So I think that if some of these southern states with a little less restrictive COVID, quarantines and the like, could do like Huntsville did, which was scale it down, spread it out, require masks, so on and so forth. I mean, I think it'd be Katie bar the door as far as having one and having a lot of people show up.
Yeah. No, I think people are excited and ready to get back to whatever the new normalcy is going to be, but we're still not quite there yet. We're still, we're having peaks right now, and hopefully the vaccine's supposed to be promising to where we can get back to a normal life.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, we'll see how all that goes. So, you were talking about Shadow Man earlier. I was in a shop down in New Orleans, of course. With Shadow Man, that makes sense that it'd be down there.
Nice.
But I was down in a shop in New Orleans and found that Shadow Man number 11 that's signed by Bob Hall for $5. It was just in the comic book box. I'm like, okay. Of course, I already had a Shadow Man 11, but I didn't have one signed. So
Yeah.
that was
Nice.
a pretty cool pickup. And so what do you, as far as series, of course, Bloodshot, Eternal Warrior, these were all some of the big series. Well, what would you think would be one of the sleepy? I've only heard Southerners say that's because nobody up north named Katie. So, So what would you consider a sleeper series? One that went, is maybe a 6-part miniseries, and you said, "Man, I don't know why I don't hear more about this one."
Oh gosh. Well, for modern Valiant, like Divinity, the the 1 in 40s and
Either
1 in 30 covers command a lot of high prices. But
you broke
from,
up on me. What were you saying?
Valiant and oh, sorry about that. So maybe Divinity from modern Valiant,
Hmm.
are a little bit sleepers. The covers pull really high dollar amounts, the 1 in 40s and 1 in 30s that La Rosa had done. So they're really sleeper, but man, they're so good. And then from Valiant yesteryear, a Valiant and Acclaim, Unity is always going to be special to my heart because of the
Hmm.
connected storyline, but
Yeah.
they're plentiful. You can find them everywhere. But maybe the 4-part miniseries by Jim Calfiore, Armorines from
Hmm.
Acclaim, and the 6-issue series of Shadowman Volume 3. So there was a variant, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, which is
Yeah.
extremely difficult to find. So,
And of course,
people
they
on the
made a
hunt, those are
Shadow
the ones
Man.
they want to look out for.
They made a Shadow Man game back in the day. I think I read somewhere that they're actually
Yep.
remastering to re-release that game.
Yeah, I think it
Um,
just re-released this month
okay.
recently.
Yeah, so they had the Exo Man of War and Iron Man. They had comics to go with the release of the deal, and so that was Acclaim's Vision. Now Turok is probably the more wider known. Um, at that time, he was a Valiant Acclaim property,
Sure.
wider known Nintendo game. Um, but yeah, the Armorines was a good one. Um, and of course, I mentioned earlier the second series that they're kind of hard to find, especially that issue 4. There's actually an issue of Armorines that looks like this one right here.
Yeah.
It's an homage to this one. I think it's issue
Yep.
13 or 12.
Yeah, I
Which I
think. Yeah, it's.
got.
Yeah.
So usually when I would think you have people on your show. You don't want to have you want to have somebody that you got more stuff than. But Justin has really got an extensive Valiant collection. In my defense, I just started collecting comics again. So the vast majority of my comics I didn't have until a year ago. So I started
Wow.
collecting a little over a year ago, and as we all have done, got back into what we remember. And when I was collecting back in the '90s, Valiant was hard to come by. I mean, super expensive, and at least where I was at. And so I went
Yeah.
back to the things. I was finding all this stuff in the dollar bin, and I'm a completionist, and so I started filling up all those runs. Um, but yeah, so maybe that gives me a buy. Justin's just been stock holding all this stuff for years.
There's a lot of us that have been stock holding this for years. You know, it's a small community, but it stretches the globe.
Yeah.
And we always welcome anybody new into the fold. And so I see you've got like a Unity One red logo back there. There were
Mhm.
only 5,000 of those made. And you've got the Valiant CGC label on it. And
Yeah, which
so,
is
yeah, I mean,
killer because I'm
it,
like, they
it's a
quit
gorgeous
doing it.
thing.
Yeah. And of course, on the back, you can
Yeah,
actually see it a little bit better.
but no, I'm,
Um, but
yeah,
that's
I mean,
actually, and
it's
to
great
talk
that they
about,
did a label.
I'm sorry.
No, I mean, it's a great label. I'm happy that they're doing that and talking about Unity. And yeah,
And of course, there's the Frank Miller cover. That's Eternal Warrior #1. And with Eternal Warrior #1, you had the gold version, and then you had the gold era version. And
right. You had two different ones.
yeah, the one with the price on it and the one without the price on it. This is the one that's got the price on it. I've got the other one down there somewhere. But Yeah, the Unity was an awesome storyline. How they tied in um, Magnus the robot fighter into being a child of this is what 30, 40 years later, so I'm not really spoiling anything for nobody, but how they
Spoilers.
Magnus was again the acquired. How they tied part was one of the harbingers had a kid, and during the Unity deal, which time was all this amalgamous deal, they send him into the future, and he becomes Magnus the robot fighter. So there's actually a point where Magnus holds his own self, holds the baby in the comic. Um,
Yeah.
so that was pretty cool. But yeah, so there's two sets of Unity. The one the Frank Miller done, and then was it Walt Simonson did the other ones?
Yep, it
So
was Walter Simonson.
that's what I thought. Um, and so and of course that holds that ride that I was mentioning earlier, where he dies. In that one, it's in that connected cover deal. Turok's second appearance is in Archer and Armstrong, and that's one of those covers as well. So yeah, just a lot of great stuff.
Yeah.
And so we're reaching at an hour and 21 minutes, and I do appreciate everybody that's come in and stayed or just come in and said, hey, during this time. And for all of those of you going to watch this on the rewind, I do appreciate you hanging out with us as well. Justin, if somebody wants to all of a sudden become more acquainted or has some questions about Valiant, is IG the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So collecting Valiant is actually three individuals. It's three of us. And so I post on our Instagram, and then
Okay.
Dwan runs our Twitter, which is Collecting Valiant. And then another gentleman, Jim, he's kind of on sabbatical. He works for the federal government, and he is in college getting his master's degree. So we actually did some podcasting a few years ago. And we just kind of took a sabbatical after DMG purchased the company
Mm-hmm.
from Dinesh. And we were a little jaded, but we're still really active on Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, and so either Twitter or Instagram, you're going to find Dewan and myself. We have a Discord where the three of us still communicate and talk and collect and share our passion, that we've been considering opening up so that other people can share in that passion too. So
Cool.
we might post on Instagram or Twitter about that soon if we open it up. But yeah, so Collecting Valiant is really just, it's three of us that are
Okay.
passionate across the U.S.
All right, cool. I didn't know that. So, yeah. So, if you
Yeah.
interested in learning more about Valiant, as you've seen, since we've been rambling about it for over an hour and a half almost, we will
It was easy
certainly.
to do.
It was easy to do, and so I think it just shows people's buy into the characters. I mean, I know that Star Wars fans are the same way, which I like Star Wars also. Anything that you like an awful lot, you can talk an awful lot about. It just stands to reason. Well, Sith Lordly, you take the baton because he stayed the whole time, so I do appreciate him for.
You get the Valiant no prize there, my man.
So, but be sure to hit that like button as y'all are watching this, and the subscribe button, because I am giving away a New Mutants 98 9.4 CGC slab when I get to 600 YouTube subscribers, and see former videos as to how you can enter to win that. Sith Lordly, I know, is on Spying Ticks. I think it's a 10 o'clock Central Time, I think. Seth, if you want to say something different, go ahead. But over on Spine Ticks channel, so y'all can certainly check that out. Justin mentioned where you can connect with him at. And of course, I'm Southern Comic Geek, both on IG and YouTube. And you see me regularly posting to both. So I do appreciate everybody for hanging out. Be sure that on this weekend that everybody stays safe, maybe read some good comics, go get Comixology and start reading a whole bunch of Valiant comics, and Yes, there's the disclaimer. Spine Ticks is 18 years or older because it can get crazy on there. So, um, but yeah, so do appreciate everybody for hanging out. Until next time, keep